Go away without my little drive.
Is your thumb drive? Or is
No, it's in the back.
Good evening. And since Brian's called me this afternoon and said he has a family thing that came up at the last minute, we wouldn't be able to be at tonight's meeting. So I'm going to sort of help as chair. So tonight's meeting, this is August 8th, meeting of Natural Resources Committee, called to order. And tonight, our agenda is basically going to consist of a presentation to start with. Oh. Thank you.
Yep. So we're going to have a presentation tonight from Brian Vaughn and Rita Baker. Brian is the Senior Resource Scientist with Metro, and Rita Baker is the coordinator with the Greater Oregon City Watershed Council. And the other three items we're going to have are on your agenda on your screen tonight. But I think we'll be able to get out of here tonight fairly early if we keep things moving, about 8:30. I don't see why we shouldn't be able to get done by 9. So thanks very much for coming, both of you, on such short notice. I appreciate it. Take it away. Yeah.
Well, again, my name is Rita Baker, and I'm the coordinator for the Greater Oregon City Watershed Council.
Brian Vaughn, Natural Resource Scientist at Metro.
Thank you for having us here this evening. We're here to talk to you a little bit about the status of our Newell Canyon project, which is Metro-owned property, and a project that we're collaborating with to do some restoration work. Let's see. But first, I wanted to step back a little bit and let you know a little bit about the Greater Oregon City Watershed Council. We're a group that was established in 2004, recognized by the City of Oregon City, and it's a group of volunteers who are working to improve the watershed in their local area, and it's a non-regulatory voluntary group. We were also recognized by Clackamas County in 2007. Our mission is to work to conserve, enhance, and protect the quality and ecology of, integrity of the watersheds by providing a cooperative forum to promote and facilitate integrated watershed management. The Greater Oregon City watershed area is shown on the map. To the north, it's bounded by Holcomb-Bradley. To the east, it's Ridge Road. To the south, Spangler. And to the west, it's Highway 99.
Excuse me just a second. Could you, I'm having a problem getting this on the screen. Would you? Yeah.
Switch your silver knob over.
That's what I was going. It didn't seem like, well, there we go.
There you go.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, flip it to the left. Here, gotcha. Oh,
Sorry.
no problem. Sorry.
Just to give you a little orientation, this is the southern portion of our watershed area, and that's Parrot Creek in Beaver Creek. This is not a very long thing here, but this is basically Abernathy Creek with its many tributaries, and this is Newell Creek here.
It'll scroll better.
So in 2010, the Greater Oregon City Watershed Council received a grant from the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board to conduct a watershed assessment and action plan. And that's basically the blueprint that tells us where we want to focus. And the key tributary, the key anchor habitat that we were looking at is principally the Newell Canyon area. And two of the relevant parts that we are addressing in our restoration activities now is to remove riparian weeds, plant native vegetation, and expand the width of the corridor, and to monitor water temperature, sediment, and other water qualities.
So I'm going to talk a bit about the Metro's Newell Canyon natural area. So the natural area was included in both the 1995 and 2006 natural areas bond measures, primarily because of the intact nature of the canyon and habitats within the canyon. We do have some populations of coho and steelhead in the lower reaches of Newell Creek as well as in Abernathy Creek. So the first purchase Metro made was in 1996 after the passage of the 1995 bond. It included 41 acres. We're currently up to about 280 acres in that area, that target area for our region. The parcels in Newell Canyon also connect to Abernathy Creek, which was essentially part of Abernathy Creek is part of the target area for our natural areas bond. So we do have some holdings on Abernathy Creek, which is the tributary that flows to the Willamette. So Newell is a tributary of Abernathy, and Abernathy is a tributary to the Willamette.
Is there a maximum number of acres you're looking at to preserve in Newell Creek beyond that 280?
That's we do have some acreage goals, and we do have some specific goals are listed on our refinement plan. That's on our website. I don't have that right off the hand. I believe in 95 we had some specific goals and for acreage. In 2006, the bond was the refinement plan included some additional lands on Abernathy Creek, and since in passage of the 2006 bond, we've bought a couple parcels on Abernathy Creek, which was an addition to this target area for Metro. So I don't have the specifics, but I could send that to you guys if you'd like. So the map above, so there's a mosaic of land ownership here in Newell Canyon, and it's not all owned by Metro. There are a number of city parcels and Metro holdings, Metro being the purple and Oregon City or other protected lands in green. And then you can see Newell Creek flows here. Let me get my cursor here. This is Clackamas Community College up in here, which is primarily the headwaters of Newell Creek, and it flows down through the canyon, crosses Highway 213, and flows into Abernathy Creek here. And this is Abernathy Creek flowing from here down toward the Willamette.
So we have begun a collaboration and a partnership with various entities, and that includes obviously Metro, the City of Oregon City, Clackamas County Soil and Water Conservation District. And our goal here is to restore 8 acres of native vegetation. And if you can go back a minute, Brian, I want to show the 40 acres in the green a little closer. This is the cemetery over in this area. This is some property that there was a dedication, I believe, from developers that the City of Oregon City took, and there were other properties around here that had previously been platted and purchased by Metro. Go back. And their goal again is to conduct some weed treatment to increase the quality and quantity of the watershed area. That's another view of the boundaries of the treatment areas that we're planning, and you can see that the project boundary is indicated. The riparian vegetation is in the dark green, and that's principally reed canary grass that we've started some mowing and some treatment on, and then the upland areas where the invasive treatments are going to take place.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have reed canary grass all the way down the creek?
No.
Or you're just focusing on?
No, this is a kind of a flat open area that has become very hospitable to it. There's a lot of intact habitat and shade that kind of controls it further downstream, but it's not exclusive to this area, but concentrated.
Have you identified any areas upstream of the area, that kind of help seed that area? Because it seems like, if you go ahead, even if you control it, as long as you have reed canary grass upstream, you've got that potential for it to get reestablished, at a later time.
Let me address that a little bit. There are some other project opportunities upstream, and largely that's on the Clackamas Community College campus, and they are looking at doing some work on the John Inskeep Learning Center, which would include some additional riparian work and revegetation. I believe that plan is being developed now. So it will work in concert with some of the other activities going on in the watershed. Though we're not entirely going to remove all of the reed canary grass, the strategy is to establish the planting. So we'll be doing maintenance and on the plantings to so we can keep the reed canary grass down long enough to get the plants established to a free to grow stage, versus trying to completely eradicate the grass.
We had applied for some in-stream work in this area to put some woody debris as another tactic to try to water out the reed canary grass. We weren't successful, but that still could be on the agenda in the future.
This map that we have in front of us with a red boundary line is really the entire canyon plus its tributary feeds. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
We this map actually includes it takes off the land parcels, but this includes within the project boundary about 211 acres of metro land. So it's only a portion of what the holdings are there in that target area. But we focused on this because was a good break upstream of Highway 213, and so the project is covering most of what is the canyon in Newell Creek. But we do have some city lands and also some private lands. And we've been working, as Rita mentioned, in partnership with other organizations, one being the Clackamas Soil Water Conservation District. And we're having ongoing discussions about working with them to help some of the private landowners inside of this area.
And this question now is to Rita. You were a recipient of a $20-some thousand grant from Metro Enhancement through the city here. Is that being applied to this work? Is that what it's for?
Yes.
Okay.
We have another slide where we'll discuss kind of
Okay.
some of the breakdown
Good.
of what we've gotten.
Good deal.
I want to go back to Richard's question. The hydrology here is really varied, so it starts in these steep gradient
Yes.
streams, and at the toe of the canyon, there's a lot of springs and seeps. So a lot of the hydrology is much different in the bottom of the canyon versus the top of the canyon. So a lot of water comes from springs and seeps at the base of the canyon, which creates, in general, decent water quality conditions. And we did do some initial water quality monitoring, and we had actually temperature reduction after the water going through the canyon, after the water went through the canyon.
Sure.
So it shows that, an intact habitat like this in such a large scale is really functioning well to protect water quality as well as habitat. And largely this project is trying to protect and just maintain these intact habitat conditions.
Are there things occurring in that area now that would impact flows?
Not that we know of. There's no water diversions that we know of, no.
How about other, additional development in the upper areas? I'm not sure where those might be. It looks like it's kind of limited based on the map. But
Well, most of the basin, the Newell Canyon basins, besides out from the canyon, is pretty much developed.
okay, could
so-
we go back to that slide one more time, please?
We could go back to the larger slide if you wanted to see.
No, that's okay.
Okay, sorry.
Well,
Is this one okay?
yeah, I guess I was wondering what, it doesn't look like there's a lot of potential for development around there because it's already developed, it's metro or city and so forth. Is that a fair statement, or?
I believe there's one commercially zoned piece of property that applicants have been talking to the city about. It's, let me see, this area here?
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, that'd be the Walmart-owned site.
Sure.
I guess what I'm kind of interested in, because the headwaters are out of the protected area, maybe you can, I'm looking at kind of like the stormwater management, because you have like the Berry Hill Shopping Center, you got 213. Where's all the stormwater? Because 213 is heavily used, so you have all the traffic-related non-point pollution. Is that still going down Newell Creek Canyon through the stormwater system?
All the water would flow in of this watershed would flow into Newell Creek Canyon because ODOT or other developers aren't diverting it elsewhere. So,
So all the-
ODOT or others, as we have some older developments that have probably not as high or advanced treatment as newer developments. So there is an opportunity with the city or others to do voluntary actions within those developments or those areas. And I believe that there has been some opportunities identified in the red soil campus area for the county as potential wetland and some restoration work up there, which would be one of the headwaters to Newell Creek Canyon.
So the portions of the headwaters that are within the city limits that are controlled under the city's overlay district, or, we can be managed today. If there's
I was just kind of, wondering
but this
what
is
happens.
majority of this is still in the county.
To the brake dust, the dripping antifreeze, oil,
Good question.
all this stuff from the parking lots and stuff, basically that.
Well, if that's an urban development, then the city has got stormwater management requirements for that.
Where does it flow to? I think that's the
It
question.
depends on the site. Most of it's either going to be treated and flow back into the stormwater system, or if it was developed today, depending on the scale of the development.
Well, I'm thinking of something like Sherry's, right there at 213. And
Well, you're talking about some older developments, so it's hard to know until we look at the plans for that.
That's part of the headwaters, and it's obviously
Yeah.
developed, so I'm just trying to figure out what happens to the...
Yeah.
I think, should it ever redevelop, there may be opportunities.
Sure.
Not unlike
Yeah.
what happened at Safeway, but, realistically, we have to take an condition now and try to mitigate as much as we can.
So
I'll
just,
give you a little historic perspective here from the 80s,
Well,
83, briefly, just real quick.
Do you want to?
And the only reason I want to do this is that these questions pertain to what they're saying, is that I fought the battles to protect Newell Creek Canyon when ODOT was building the bypass freeway, now called Highway 213. And we were interacting with all this stuff that you're talking about. As an example, Fred Meyer Complex is all underground detention because that was the city's requirement at that time. Then it began to modulate by 1985, where Sherry's in the south, Berry Hill Shopping Center, the city began a process of letting them consider both on-site and off-site detention. So what I'm saying here is it's a very complex area, and what you're inheriting and working with is the things that were done in the past correctly and the things that weren't. I have a fundamental question for you, and that is that this concern is about the headwaters. The college is, as you said, the majority headwater for Newell Creek Canyon, and you've got 12 acres of parking on one side of that campus that feeds into that stream at the source that have no oil separators in that parking lot, called Randall Hall parking lot. I mean, I was dealing with that back in the 80s. Why aren't we converting this? So I guess in your thinking, I would hope that Metro and Greater Watershed Council would consider encouraging the process to be more active at the headwaters area too. There are people that did solve their problems on site.
And I'll just follow up really quickly, and then I think Pete wants us to move on, I think.
Yes, I know it is.
There was
Well,
a
that-
Metro enhancement grant, I believe, granted to Clackamas Community College. This was not the transfer station grant. It was a nature and neighborhoods grant to do some work like you're mentioning. And if you guys would like, I can try to pass on some information to Pete from the coordinator at Metro with the grants, and that might help give you guys a little more information about what's happening at the campus.
Yeah, I mean, related questions have to do with other aspects of the city's regulatory process, like our MS4 permit, our stormwater permit with West Lynn and Gladstone. Those aren't necessarily things that these guys can answer tonight.
Well, no, it's
Yeah.
more kind of looking at kind of
Yeah.
water quality, what
Yeah.
you can control, what you can't, and trying to understand how it fits together.
Sure, yeah.
And we do have a liaison from our Watershed Council who's active on the planning for this activity there on Clackamas Community College. So we are involved.
Eric Hand, right?
Well, actually, it's Doug Neely.
Oh, okay. Well, Eric Hand is the city's stormwater management coordinator, so.
And he's on our technical assistance
Yeah.
committee.
Yeah.
So we have before you what our restoration project timeline is, and I won't read that aloud, but it basically will include 2 years of active revegetation and invasive weed treatment, and then 2 years of maintenance. And the grants that we have to date will cover the 2012-2013 piece, and Metro would take on the maintenance thereafter. So we had earlier described the kinds of projects and partners the project partners that we have and the money that we have received. And we have received $59,150 in grants to date. A direct amount from the City of Oregon City is $5,000, and as you mentioned, Mr. Herman, $20,000 through the Metro Enhancement Grant.
Congratulations.
Yeah, we gotten additional support from Metro, both for Brian's time and some cash money, and also from the Clackamas Soil Water Conservation District. They have paid for some of the weed treatments already and have pledged to continue that work with us, probably with the private landowners, and we've also done the temperature monitoring as well.
There we go.
So there we are.
I have a question. Is the 59,000 the cumulative total of all the grants, or is that okay?
Yes.
That's wonderful. You've never had this kind of funding before. This is great, right?
We have received money for culvert replacement on Potter Creek,
Okay.
and also for our watershed assessment and action plan. We're attempting to gain nonprofit status so that we can go for more private foundation funds, but we've been fortunate to have gotten the ones we have to date.
Okay, good.
Are there informal fish counts for the coho and steelhead on returns or reed surveys?
There was a survey done in, was it 2000? Yeah. 99, yeah. And there were some evidence of both coho and steelhead and Pacific and brook lamprey as well.
But
But the numbers I don't have off the top of my
But
head.
99 would have been the last year.
That's the last fish survey that we officially did. We have seen juvenile salmonids
Okay.
in the lower portions of Newell Creek as well as Abernathy Creek. Abernathy is likely a cold water refugia for downstream migrating juveniles in the Willamette, and it would, could be very possible that a lot of those downstream migrating juveniles make it all the way up into the lower portions of Newell Canyon as well. Because we've seen quite a few juvenile salmonids in Abernathy Creek close to Newell Creek.
So from that, what I just heard you say, that would indicate that the possibility of them just being transient into the canyon is one of the, they're not necessarily from spawning progeny in the canyon. Is that true, or?
We believe that there's both a spawning population of coho in
Okay.
Abernathy and a spawning population of steelhead in Abernathy, and we haven't documented spawning fish in Newell Canyon, but it's highly possible.
Okay, good. Good.
Brian, is there public access, like a trail system through there, or plans to expand one?
Newell Canyon is a natural area of Metro. It's not officially open to the public. We don't have public facilities there for access, though there are a number of informal trails that lead from some of the ends of the roadways and some of the public right-of-ways that go into the canyon. So there are informal trails that largely follow old logging roads throughout the site, and there are people that utilize it now. Long-term, and part of the first 95 bond is we looked at that as a future publicly open natural area. We don't have plans right now for that, but that's on the table for the future as the region grows.
Informal use is something that we've tried to tackle as well. In April, we partnered with Solve and Metro to do some cleanup at the Forest Edge Apartments, and I think the count was 35 shopping carts that we pulled out of there, and a lot of other material that didn't need to be there. So it is being used.
Could the Natural Resources Committee be of assistance?
Well, you don't have any money you're not using. That would be great.
I got one. I mean, we're going to be doing a similar natural resource plan as we did for Kanema, and while the Kanema plan was developed, I think while this group was forming, we'd be happy to share that plan and take some feedback from any of you as that process happens. So through this winter, we'll be looking at developing conservation targets and describing the key ecological attributes and threats to those key ecological attributes. And so as we move through that process, some of you may have some experience with the canyon that you'd like to share, and some information about either wildlife or specialized habitat types that we can basically describe in the plan for future protection or enhancement. So while the project we're doing is a start, the plan's going to describe future strategic restoration actions, and your guys' review of the plan would be great.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I know your time's valuable, so. Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Well,
Thank you.
Thank you.
good.
What's your thumb drive there? You just have to save the release.
Yeah. Just in case we need it.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Thanks for coming.
Okay. Hi, everybody.
Hello,
It's
Pete.
just us and the Willamette Falls TV. So I just wanted to note that we do have a section on our agenda, public comment for items not listed on the agenda, but nobody is in the audience, so we've just skipped over that section. And without further ado, our agenda for discussion items, I'm just going to follow through on the document screen. So if you guys want to load up each item, the first discussion. First discussion item is an update on the Heritage Tree and Grove designation process. And I'll give you a quick update on what happened with this NRC's recommendation to the City Commission with respect to Waterboard Park. And following a work session at which some of you may have been at, I'm not sure who was, but
Richard and I were, and so was
okay.
Brian.
So do you want to give us an update on what the work session upshot was, Jerry?
Richard, would you rather comment?
Go right ahead, Jerry.
I'm trying to remember back. Well, you know, I have a couple of questions here about process tonight, fundamental
Yeah.
questions about process. We have a chairman and a vice chairman, I think, position that we established. Don't we have a vice chairman here tonight?
Well, Andrew Sinise has been absent, unexcused.
So he's the one that's identified,
And Doug Neely is officially going to ask him to step down.
so he's our vice chairman, Andrew?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because he used to sit over here next to me. Okay.
Correct,
All right.
yeah.
So I thought you were Bob. Okay. So my question was more or less who's running the meeting tonight. So nothing
Okay.
against you, but it'd be nice to know if we're following some kind of protocol. here.
Right. I talked to Brian this afternoon after he told me that, and I offered to.
Okay. So we
Run
should
them.
pick a vice chairman, it seems to me, at some point here.
At some point, it's not on the agenda this evening,
All right.
but September we'll need to do that. Yeah.
Well, okay, I'll try to give a summary, and Richard was there too. I hope you'll chime in here if need be. First of all, I didn't know that was going to be on a work session agenda. I never heard a thing about this. So we came to find out what the staff was going to say, not knowing anything about what the staff recommendation was going to be. And I believe what we decided to do at the last meeting we had, our previous meeting, by the way, was canceled, which I want to talk about that tonight,
Yeah.
why that happened. But
Well, in a nutshell, I can answer that. It's my fault. I was overworked. I had hoped to get an agenda prepared before I went on vacation in July with my in-laws, and I wasn't able to do that, and subsequently I had to cancel the meeting.
Okay.
That's all there is to it, and I apologize for that.
All right. Okay, well, what we were wondering, Brian, myself, and also Richard, was, all of a sudden it just happened, okay? So we weren't quite sure whether it had something. All right, fine. We thought maybe it had something to do with.
I was in Mexico, and there was a decision.
All right,
and,
okay.
Yeah, it wasn't the way I would have liked to have handled it.
All
But
right.
yeah.
Oh, okay, because we're trying to keep good communication moving between this committee and you and
Right.
all staff concerned.
Yeah, I
All right, so,
understand.
having said that, we were kind of surprised that this thing was on the work agenda for that night. That is a discussion about the staff's recommendation, what it would be. We made our recommendation, I think, in a general way, saying we want to advance it forward to the city commission. We weren't not going to break it apart into two modules because the people in the audience wouldn't let that happen. They were the applicants, not us. So I think we did our due diligence. And then what I heard the staff give the commissioners, primarily Tony, was an indication that they felt the recommendation shouldn't be made. And I don't remember what the reasons were. Maybe, Richard, you do. But, and we each had a brief amount of time. I think Brian and I went up there for 3 minutes total, and I think, Richard, you could have gone up, but maybe you didn't. I think we gave maybe 3 minutes of input as to what our reasoning was. What I just said, that we asked it to move forward to the commission for action. We didn't split it apart because that was not the desire of the applicant, which isn't us, wasn't the city, was the citizen.
And that's what I remember, too.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and from that, I believe what I heard the mayor say was and we also stated that we felt the ordinance, the heritage tree ordinance, needs some work. And I think we all agreed that at the last time we met formally in June. And I think there was an agreement to work together cooperatively with the staff to alter, improve, modify the ordinance. So we made that clear. And the mayor picked up on that theme and indicated that he would like to see that done too. I don't know how complex that is, but I think, Brian and myself at least, committed to working on it if it will go somewhere. If there isn't if there's an attitude of acceptance that will work cooperatively, then we will do that. That's where I'm at. So, I don't know what more I can say. Richard?
Okay. Yeah. And that's kind of what I heard too, Jerry, was
Okay.
that they wanted to have the NRC look at the ordinance in more detail before they decided to move ahead with any kind of decision on the actual nomination. And beyond that, I don't have a lot more detail other than to talk about the draft edits that you guys have prepared, or at least Richard and Brian have already done some work on, which we've got up on the screen here. So now, yeah. So that's kind of where we're at. And if we would like to go through these, Richard, if you're prepared to talk a little bit about this.
Where are they?
So,
That's what I'd like.
is it if you click on the thing and hit document, it should pop up.
Don't we have a hard I have a hard copy.
You sent me that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Maybe I should
Yeah.
put this on.
Is this what you got?
So,
I think
yeah.
Yeah, I was just using.
It didn't include the comments. It just included the red lines because I had to convert it into a
Printed it out. This-
PDF document.
Oh, I just printed it for you.
Is that coming up?
yes, I think.
Oh, I got that. All right.
So I was just going to go through this.
Sure.
On the first page, so one of the concerns was the definition of a grove, and I think the definition of the grove has been amended on the very last page, or at least page 4. So if you scroll down to that. So currently, what the definition of a grove, heritage grove, is a tree or group of trees designated by the city as having unique importance and subject to the heritage tree regulations of Section 1208-050. And where a grouping of 2 or more heritage trees is separated by no more than 20 feet on a property or properties, the term heritage grove may be used. But also, what you've amended here was, instead of the word group, you changed that to stand and defined it to mean 3 or more, with no definition of separation by 20 feet. That's been removed, and which together create a mutual canopy continuous over 80 or more % of the area within the boundaries of the proposed heritage tree stand.
Whose language is this?
That's
Well,
Richard and Brian.
some of it would be mine, but the who together create a mutual canopy continuously, et cetera, that's not mine, and I would not agree.
Okay.
I don't know what the pertinence of that is, the relative
I think
Yeah.
that's
it
Brian.
is,
I
you
can't
know,
believe that's Brian.
when you talk about percent of cover of the canopy. I'm not sure what significance that has, actually.
Well, Brian's not here to explain it. and
Right.
I think that was his word.
Yeah, it's
Grammatically,
not-
I don't know how you can have a who when you're talking about, I think it's a
Yeah.
which, but that's things like that.
Could I back up?
Yeah, go
Because
for
I'm
it.
trying to, I guess, I know we're reviewing this right now, but are we reviewing it at the request of the, the city to make a final decision?
We're not making a final decision on it. We're just starting to review it. That's my take on it, you know.
Okay,
Yeah,
well, I was
yeah,
just trying to
yeah.
think within the time frame we talked tonight, I'm
Sure.
trying to figure out if we're, trying
Yeah.
to wordsmith everything here tonight to
Oh,
get
no.
a revision.
We're generating
I
some
think what
discussion,
you're
I think.
seeing is something that Brian and I did,
Sure.
kind of back and forth, and sent it over to
Yep.
Pete, maybe 6 weeks ago or so.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
something. And it was just kind of a first, cut at how each of us might have looked at certain wording and so forth. So,
But this includes feedback from the city council?
no,
No, this is just
No.
coming
Oh,
from. yeah,
okay.
no,
yeah.
it's just simply a first cut, not, like an hour each probably.
Sure,
Okay,
okay,
that's-
thanks.
Yeah. And what this doesn't include is what I haven't finished yet, which was a discussion about the 4 different levels of protection that the city has for trees in general, including groves, if you remember that thing from the ordinance. And what I specifically want to work on, not this part, is the ordinance proper, where groves don't give you any benefit when planners like you folks are trying to evaluate if the developer should get a credit for something. Well, you can save a grove, but you get no credit for saving it, as I understand the ordinance. So that's the part I want to work on. So okay.
Oh, in terms of incentives for protection?
Yes.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
You can
Yeah.
save it, you can put it into a code and covenant.
Yeah.
You can do all these things with it, but you get no credit when you're
Right.
trying to meet your standards for doing something good or not
Right.
good.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because, in that regard, because the private nominations have strictly been property owner driven, they want the recognition that merely comes with the recognition.
Right.
And on top of that, they want permanent protection if the property changes hands, which I guess is the purpose of the covenant, because it runs with the land. On top of that, there's no additional incentive just yet, other than the that protection. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but that's different than the heritage tree. That's the general tree ordinance.
Well, no, I'm talking specifically about the heritage tree ordinance.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, well, anyway, that's where I'm working.
Okay. So if you're talking about tree protection in general,
Yes,
then yeah.
and the benefits that you can accrue
Yeah.
by doing this and that and whatever.
Yeah, that's not in 1208. That's a separate
Right.
chapter.
Gotcha.
1741.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pete, could you just quickly outline what the next steps are? So the work group has looked at this, put in their 2 cents. What are the next steps and kind of timelines for this?
Well, I think it's coming back to the group at large for additional review. You guys, we'll probably want to get additional comments in our September meeting. You're welcome to work on it as a group you know, while we're not meeting, and just bring it all back. We can email it around and that sort of thing. There's nothing stopping us working on this outside of our formal meetings. And if there's any resources or additional input that staff can provide in the interim, I'll be happy to do it. Yeah. I think I wasn't at the work session, so I'm not really sure what the direction from the City Commission was, other than to send it back for further review. But if we would like to have a timeline, we can set one for ourselves. Our September meeting date, we will be reviewing a heritage tree nomination, a new one. And that should be fairly detailed and quite controversial. So we may want to bear that in mind, because if we're also reviewing the process of designation and trying to make a decision about the code at the next meeting and reviewing a nomination at the same time, we'll just have to be careful how we allot our time. That's all. Yeah. Yeah.
What's the relationship of our review to the decision on Waterboard Park that might be made in the future?
Yeah.
Good question.
It almost sounded like at that work session
Mhm.
I think that they would like to see our comments on the wording here, get that resolved among us, and then I'm not sure what happens then.
Yeah.
You know, is there a public process?
There'd be a public process to amend the code,
Yeah.
which would require public notice. It's in Chapter 12, so it's not a zoning code revision, which is good, because that doesn't require Measure 56 notice, which is where you have to notify every property owner in the city. I'll have to clarify that, because, you know, merely by editing Chapter 1208, you're not making a change to code that can affect the value of someone's property, because the process of designation is not occurring with enactment of the ordinance. It's just a process.
Okay.
You know, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that allows the city to provide the normal amount of public notice at a public hearing, or to amend Chapter 1208. Not, yeah, but they would need to do that.
How many months are we looking at in this process?
Well, it kind of depends on when we get a draft together, and then what the city commission, when the city commission would like to review it at one of their regular meetings, because they meet twice a month. Yeah, so it could be about 2-3 months if we get a draft done.
But not a year.
I would hope not, but yeah,
All right.
you know, these things do take time.
Right.
Yeah.
Pete, is there any way to get any kind of clarification? Because I feel a little bit like the blind men with the elephant, because we did invest a good bit of time and effort to kind of get
On
to
the
this
nominations,
point.
yeah.
No, then we kind of forward it, then we get kind of direction to go back
Yeah.
and review it.
Yeah.
But the most clarity of direction or areas, and just to prioritize stuff, because otherwise, you know, we could work on this again, send it back up, and they say, well,
Good question.
try again, and it's kind of like, you know, the more direction, the more kind of clarity, and what they see as the issues or the problems or concerns, it helps guide our efforts to review stuff.
Well, I think, yeah, there's probably some guidance questions that we can ask the city commission to clarify at one of their work sessions as well, and come back and give us. I know from staff's perspective, and I don't know what you heard at the work session, but one of the concern is that there's a distinction between public and private processes. You know, we've got one requires owner consent and one that just requires the city commission to make the decision when it's in the public property. But should there be an alternative process for one of those, and what kinds of criteria should apply to both, given resources? I don't know. Yeah, I do think it would be worthwhile to ask the city commission for further direction.
It'd be helpful to get that if possible before, we met in September.
Anybody else feel that?
I feel like we should keep working through this document. I don't
Yeah.
mind what Bob just said, but I feel like we should keep working through this document with anybody that's interested in being part of the little task force or whatever that's working on it. I feel like going back to them, I don't think they would know what to ask us or offer us, other than what the mayor said, and you can get that from the minutes of that meeting, that work session,
Okay.
that he wasn't comfortable with the ordinance, the overall ordinance as it now stands, and wanted some modifications, is what I remember him saying. I don't know what else they had to say to us, personally. But I feel like some work's already gone into this, and the first time I've seen the work, so I'd like more time to look at this and talk with the people responsible for it.
Yeah, I think this was just an effort by a couple of us just to
Right.
get information over to Pete. It wasn't meant to be a final document or anything.
Yeah, I
It was
mean,
just
one of the questions
comments,
that
that we made.
had
Right.
come up previously was refining what is rare.
Yeah.
That was another issue.
Right.
Yeah. So we need to decide what definition of rare that we want to use.
And by the way, I believe part of the question on that was me, because that, I believe, can refer to the understory, just as well as it can refer to assemblage of trees, because it wasn't defined in the ordinance otherwise. In other words, the group of trees that we might be wanting to save might have a rare assemblage of understory plants, which make it more ecologically valuable. So, I mean, those are little things that I don't think we've sorted through yet, so.
Yeah.
But,
Oh, you mean
feel-
the understory, in other words, you're looking at the grove or the tree stand, but yet there are
There are
underlying
things
plants.
within the
and-
understory that are very
Yes,
valuable,
okay,
you
yes.
Personally, saving a grove of trees versus saving an individual tree means nothing to me as much as keeping the assemblage intact if it has some value for wildlife.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's just my bias.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand, Jerry, that, that's how, you're looking at it from a more ecological lens, and then I think the way the ordinance is kind of written is to think about heritage trees in parks, and they have this historical feel, and it's not necessarily looking at an ecological perspective to it. But if that's something that the group feels is necessary in order to be a criterion for heritage designation, then,
Well, a tree would make an ecosystem, but if you have a cluster of, mature trees, it seems
Yeah.
like, there'd be intrinsic interest in preserving as intact and possible the ecosystem as opposed, I've seen trees up at Tebow's that are totally surrounded by paved parking lot, but, I think it goes against kind of the intent of what we want to accomplish. That, you want to preserve the understory and what kind of other vegetation you can at the site.
Yeah. Well, I just want to add, though, that the designation, depending on where it is, may or may not impact the long-term health of that resource, depending on what resources.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Waterbury
And if
Park,
they're-
it's a charter park already,
Right. And if they're unhealthy,
and if they're,
they also provide value from an ecological standpoint, if they're the decaying standing wood value or whatever is there too. I mean, that's
Yeah.
my whole
Yeah.
thing, is that even in a deteriorated condition, the heritage tree thing is really designed to preserve a significant species, make sure it's healthy, that people keep it healthy, that they won't top it and all this stuff. And yet we get into this other thing where you might want some degradation to be a part of that. I don't know.
Yeah.
So this whole experience has been wonderful because it broadened our perspective on what maybe
Yeah.
we're trying to do.
Well, I think something else that would be of interest to the group is the actual covenant itself that's been drafted by the city attorney to follow up, because when the private property owner consents to that covenant, when they apply, the covenant language includes the maintenance obligations in this code, and it includes the violation and penalty language and enforcement. And it also includes language, and this is a draft that's been done recently because we're trying to get those two that were approved under covenant the oak tree on Center Street, and the Ainsworth House Ponderosa Pine. So it also includes the maintenance obligations as well as what the city is not obligated to do on the property. So, the owner is essentially assuming the maintenance. The city's not obligated to maintain that tree, but at the same time, it doesn't preclude future resources if they're available. Yeah.
Easy to solve this problem, give them a tax deduction on their property
Well,
taxes.
yeah. The tax deductions are done through the county assessor's office, and then
I
if
know,
they
I
can
know.
provide a
I'm just
suitable.
kidding.
Oh, I'm not. No, I mean, depending on the size of the grove, it might be it might be an incentive. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Good point.
Not to belabor the point, however, is it your understanding that nothing happens on Waterboard Park until this is resolved?
I would say not. Yeah, it's kind of a. It seems to be that the nomination can't move forward until the city commission is completely happy with the process. But that was the impression I got. But I wasn't at the meeting. Yeah.
Well, how does that affect the one that you're talking about that's coming up next time,
I don't know.
the new proposal?
Yeah.
So what?
Well, one thing I can say is, the NRC, had looked to staff for a firmer recommendation in the future with respect to the criteria that is on the books. So until the code is amended, we kind of have to work with the code that we got and provide as much clarity as we can and recommendations that we can. The recommendation can be overturned by the NRC and by the City Commission, but I think what you'll see staff doing is providing a stronger recommendation. You know what I mean? So, and we'll do that. The other thing is that with hindsight, we have stressed to the people who are providing the nomination that they need to provide a good arborist report, and we actually have 3 for the same tree. So all by certified arborists, and it is a black walnut at 713 Polk Street, growing in the alleyway behind a house. It's an unusual location because it's not in front of the house. It's a street tree technically because it's growing in public right-of-way in an alley. And it's not sure that it was, we're not sure if it blew there and started to grow or it was formally planted or not, but we've got the abutting property owner who's technically and legally bound to maintain the tree who wants to remove it, and not an abutting property owner, but an adjacent property owner across the street who's nominated it for heritage tree status. So we got an arborist report prepared by a board-certified master arborist to do a tree hazard assessment on that, and we just received that last week so that we could have a very objective determination of whether the tree is truly hazardous or not. And you'll be seeing all 3 of those reports.
Interesting.
Yeah, part and parcel. It's a juicy one. So, yeah.
So that's the potential pending thing we're going to look at. Is that what you're saying?
Bring that up to you in September.
I think, Richard, I thought what you were getting at was is the lack of resolving Waterboard Park holding up efforts at Waterboard Park. I don't think it is. I had a long talk with John Lewis here in the last 2 weeks about my attitude about things with that whole thing. And I still think they have a creative design. I still think things can be done to implement it. But they also know, and he was very direct with me, that the commission has asked them to look for other sites, which they're still doing, and he's not committed necessarily to that site any more than any new site. He's being neutral about the whole thing. And then, of course, the question that came from John was, why would we have gone through all this? I said, because we were asked to. We were responding to a nomination process that is in place, and I commend you guys for what you've done with a very difficult animal here. This whole thing's very difficult.
Yeah, the public ones seem to be a little trickier. I mean, certainly more contentious than
Right.
the ones on private, but yeah.
And I also want to commend Richard and whoever else worked on this language because, at least we have something to talk about now. So, but
Yeah. Good.
Okay.
All right, so we'll, does anybody have any other comments about this for the time being, or do you want to table it for next meeting?
Do you know something? I'm trying to figure out how to tackle this in a way that might be more efficient. I'm wondering if there's some way to divvy this up. Maybe people be willing to work on certain, instead of having everybody come up, looking at every line of every page. I'm wondering if people have certain interest areas or expertise or knowledge they want to apply. It seems like a way to kind of rationally divvy this up so that everybody has kind of a manageable stuff and could review part of it, forward their ideas so that other people see it, and that way make it more manageable, more equitable for workload and that.
I don't, to me, this is fairly manageable. There's not that many pages to look at. And also, you have to look at this as a whole. You can't piece it out, I don't think, and work on a piece of it without understanding what the whole is.
And what do you think
Because
the whole is?
Pardon?
What do you think the whole is?
No, I mean the whole ordinance.
That's
here,
what I
but-
meant.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm saying the entire ordinance
Yeah,
needs, and that's why I was
Yes.
working on that other area.
yes. And it's like, things overlap here, and there are definitions here referring to other things throughout the pages. And it's just, to me, it's important to look at the whole thing.
I would say more of like the issues like the definition of rare, something like that.
Sure.
There seems to be certain kind of issues or processes that seem to be more contentious and in question. That's where, having certain individuals focus on that might be
Yeah.
efficient.
Well, yeah, I mean, you guys can do that as you see fit. I think staff will offer suggestions. And then I think ultimately the city attorney may want to chime in and offer their 2 cents. But whatever changes we do, we'll want to try to compile them and track them adequately so that we can see what's been changed over time.
I do have a question on page 2,
Okay?
where it looks like there is a definition for rare,
Yeah.
threatened, and endangered, and then there's a link.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know, off chance, what that's reference to?
Well, it's often tricky when you provide a website link because the website link may change. It may be preferable to actually get the definition and insert it in the code.
Yeah, for a regular layperson reviewing that, that's not very helpful.
And then, you got to kind of say, well, if we're happy with the definition, we understand that the definition may change in the future, but for the time being, it is what it is, because that definition may be amended as well. And
Yeah, see, the problem you run into here, I didn't exactly like that document. Brian likes that document. I would say just refer to either the state or the federal or both threatened and endangered species lists. I mean, you can't, there's tons of species to talk about, and therefore I don't think it would be too appropriate or maybe not even manageable to actually include it in here,
yeah,
because it would be a thick document of species.
but there's pretty much a standard list that changes from time to time,
Yes.
and it may be amended from time to time by the state and the federal government, but at least you can make a reference to it. Yeah.
That's why I didn't think the book would be a good idea, because that's, it's 2010, well, that's already, probably prepared in 2007 or 8, maybe, gets published by 2010, so it's already 3 or 4 years old.
Okay. Yeah, good point.
But on the other hand, how do you provide something simple that somebody can look at, the layman can look at? That's what you're getting at, I think.
Well, just
And I
basically, you have a neighbor look and consider a recommendation. They're trying to figure out the ecological or significance of this particular tree or grove. If you know, they're particularly not everybody's hooked up to the computer or the internet to the same degree. You know, this is, I won't say gobbledygook, but it's not accessible to lay people in a way they readily understand.
I
Yeah.
agree. Okay, well, that's pretty easy to fix. I mean, I refer to the most current list, and...
Oh.
Okay, good point.
That's right, so.
Can you?
You know, this is interesting. I just, I know you guys already worked on it. Page 1 of 5 talks about the ones that are considered eligible, and there's some work done here on deciduous, broadleaf versus horticulture, whatever, other evergreen and conifer trees. Evergreens crossed out, and conifer, there are a lot of evergreens that are not conifers. Civic U, case in point.
Your own.
So, I mean, this is the kind of thing we need to look through a little more. Seems to
Okay.
me. Even though it's
Yeah.
good.
Well, let's bash it around a little
All right.
bit.
Yeah.
And, yeah, what's up, Eric?
I was wondering if you could send this out and we could just kind of circulate it via email, make
Yeah,
comments.
because this is a PDF version, but Richard and Brian sent me a Word version, so I'll be happy to send it back out. Mhm. All right,
Thank you.
thank you. So, next up is item B, 4B, which is me giving you an update on the Jug Handle Project, wetland construction and restoration project.
Nope.
And so the first document is the official approved planting plans for the project. But it probably is best to start with the second document, which is the PowerPoint presentation that was given to the Planning Commission in 2010 by Nancy Krushar. So if you open up that document, you'll see the PowerPoint. We're only going to look at the first 15 slides, I think, because the second half of the PowerPoint deals with a variance application for something different. But the Jug Handle project, which is the ODOT and city joint project to improve traffic capacity on 213, also included a significant amount of natural resource analysis and impact analysis and mitigation. So this is, we'll go into this in a little more detail. Slide number 2 talks about the methodology that was used to put together the Natural Resource Overlay District application portion of the project, which was submitted to the Planning Department. So the applicant, which was Oregon City Public Works, they hired a consultant, Mason, Bruce, and Gerard, to go out and field verify and ground truth all the boundaries of any wetlands and streams and ditches and stream reaches that were connected and tied into the Jug Handle project area. And they ground truthed all those streams and wetlands based on Corps of Engineers wetland delineation methodology, and had those boundaries reviewed and concurred with by Army Corps of Engineers and Department of State Lands. The buffers which are defined in our Oregon City Code for water resources are in this table here, and these are what we delineate today. So if you are an anadromous fish-bearing stream, the stream buffer is 200 feet. If you're a intermittent stream with a slope next to it less than 25% that drains less than 100 acres, there's a buffer width of 15 feet from top of bank on either side. And all other streams, intermittent or perennial, receive either a 50-foot buffer, depending on the slope next to it, or if the slope is greater than 25% for 150 feet or more, your buffer can be up to 200 feet. And any delineated wetland has a buffer of 50 feet or more.
Excuse me, Pete, a
Yeah.
couple of us are having problems trying to get the presentation up
Flip
again.
back over to the right and
Yeah, Hey, you have to retrain it.
let's see. Go to the agenda.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the document.
You go down to.
Yeah, no,
Oh,
no.
you're okay. Yeah.
You're right, but
There
I'm
we
trying
go.
to scroll up and down.
It's not doing that.
Yeah, it doesn't want to scroll.
Yeah, I mean, basically I have the initial
This
page.
screen is a little weird, isn't it? Can you hit these?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was used to just dragging it down.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There's also, if you tap the screen, no, it's not doing
It turns
that.
blue.
Yeah. Well, no, that's not.
That's okay.
That's really annoying.
That's nice.
I hope the city recorder's watching this. Well, that seems to be working. There used to be this toolbar. Anyway, if you try going back to the agenda
Yeah.
and go to this and then hit document. Now, I think your screen is a little weird, but you can use these.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, see that?
All right. I'll go ahead and use. Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
Which page are we on then?
Second one.
Second. Okay. No, that's fine. Okay, great.
Yeah. Okay.
So this, you go back to the agenda,
Okay.
hit that,
All right.
hit document,
Okay.
and then that's how you scroll between pages.
Okay. All right.
It's the
Okay.
same.
Good. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Sorry. Actually, I'm on page 3 now, because that's the one with the table.
Mm-hmm.
It's defined in the code with the various buffers. And if you switch to page 4, you'll see a map, and the yellow outline shows the city's adopted natural resource overlay district. So that's the overlay zone. And then the blue area is the field delineated natural resource overlay district boundary that was ground truthed in the field and based on where they actually measured a stream and then measured either 50 or 200 feet out. And the ma-
Substantially less. Is that
Yeah,
true?
you're right.
Okay.
So the majority of what they were sampling were either intermittent streams, perennial streams, or wetlands, not fish-bearing and anadromous streams.
Just to the upper left-hand portion of that document with the yellow is the cove.
Correct.
The upper
Yeah.
east section of the cove.
Yeah, there's a red outline, a very thin red outline, which shows the actual project area here.
Okay.
See that? It's called the area
Yes.
of potential impact. And this map is useful to show, A, what the city's map has adopted, B, what they measured in the field, and then when they did an analysis of impact within each of those blue areas to come up with an analysis of how much area needed to be mitigated. So here's the stated purpose of our natural resource overlay district. To protect as one connected system the habitat and associated functions of the streams, riparian corridors, wetlands, and the regulated upland habitats found in Oregon City. Next. Now I'm having trouble. All right. Slide number 6 shows all of the separate stream segments and wetlands that they were looking at associated with the road project, and how they calculated the total acreage of impact. So they actually delineated 9 separate wetlands that met criteria for wetland, and 3 streams, and 1 pond, which was the pond behind Metro there. And then they calculated acreage of impact and came up with a total acreage of impact of 4.7 acres. And then the next few slides show some photographs of some of these areas. And the red lines are there to indicate where the wetland boundary is on this slide, wetland B, and where the calculated buffer impact area is. So looking at slide number 8, wetland C. Slide number 9 is wetland F and stream 16. Slide number 10 shows stream 16. Slide number 11 shows stream 15. Slide number 12 talks about the purpose of the code in some more detail. And slide number 13 is the location of the NROD mitigation site, which is located 225 feet north of the proposed project. It's not the only area that they're doing mitigation in, because they're doing native plantings throughout the entire jug handle site, but this is the area where they chose to do the majority of the impact mitigation for the project, partly because it presented one big contiguous acreage, and it was also an area that needed to be cleaned up, and it also provides floodplain remediation possibility as well. So this is the area that they're currently doing their excavation in for the floodplain, and according to Alita Froman Goodrich, they've removed 40,000 cubic yards of fill in this area to date to provide the floodplain storage, and most of that fill is compacted log deck debris and some other things that were there from when it was the
And the 40,000 yards represents what they had to make up for in terms of volume of new roads north of the overpass that was just put in.
Yeah, well, you have to have you can't have net fill within the floodplain.
Right.
So you can, what they're doing is offsetting, some of that.
And
Yeah.
my understanding, about 10,000 yards of that went as contaminated material to Portland Road or something for
Well,
processing or something.
I'm not sure where a lot of that is going.
I know where 40,000 yards are,
Yeah, okay.
on the way to Canby,
Yeah.
in a
Okay.
huge area of open land, which leads me just to question,
Mm-hmm.
are they processing it? Or what are they doing with it there? They've taken about 14 acres of land, it looks like to me, and filled it up 40 feet deep. Have you seen this, any of you, on the way to Canby? It's that area used to be called pulp siding on the Oregon City side.
Okay.
Huge piles, 30 feet tall.
I can certainly check with Alita.
You know, well, I'm not complaining, I'm
Yeah.
just wondering what the
Yeah.
disposition is.
Yeah, sure.
It's county jurisdictional lands, not your lands.
Yeah, and it's on the way down
Yeah.
to Candy. Okay.
And what it was used for in the past was composting pulp waste from the Blue Heron plant, which is now very closed, with co-composting with soil. Well, it's huge now. And there's still a sign that says that we're co-composting. I don't know what we're co-composting, but anyway, no big deal. All right.
Okay.
Pete, I had a question just about kind of survivability and monitoring.
Oh, yeah, we're going to
Mitigation.
talk about that a little bit here. That's coming up.
Okay.
So here's a shot of the NROD mitigation site before they started work, primarily. You can see some of the ground surface there. A lot of weeds, a lot of blackberries. And this is the planting list that was put together for the remediation area. And some of the quantities of trees, shrubs, and ground cover that are going to be planted there. Native species. This slide, on slide number 16, shows the zones of the mitigation site. So there's some small lettering there that shows what these shaded areas mean. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit more and read those. So bear with me. So, yeah,
Slide
the
number, where does that show up?
the diagonally striped area on the outside of the mitigation site is considered upland community. And then just within that site is transitional community. And then you've got the wetland site itself, which is wet, dry, intermittently. And they're planting, let's see, 762 trees per acre, 436 shrubs per acre, which comes out to quite a few trees and shrubs. And that's basically a spacing requirement that's set by the NROD code. Once the mitigation acreage is determined, then you have to plant it according to a spacing requirement in the code. So slide number 17 talks about your question, Bob. Per code, they have to do 5 years of site monitoring, and that would involve plots that look at the establishment. At the end of 5 years, there needs to be at least 80% survival of trees and shrubs, and no more than 10% cover of noxious weeds. So there's going to need to be ongoing yearly maintenance in order to hit that target.
Yeah, so basically
Yeah.
if you have nutria or beaver, or nutria or deer browsing all that, they're committed to replacing
Yeah.
the damaged species.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and then after 5 years, the hope is that it would be, established well enough that it'll survive on its own. But then we get into the long-term invasive problem that we're faced with in the majority of our natural resource areas. So
Yeah, because I was going to say after
Yeah.
5 years, if you're only at 10% noxious, but you just kind of hope everything's okay, if that noxious percentage increases,
yeah.
You
There is
lose
a-
good sight.
Yeah, this is a very small bulleted slide. The monitoring and mitigation plan that was submitted for the project is very detailed. I didn't provide you a copy of it, but I'd be happy to. Yeah, yeah. Mitigation is based on habitat quality. This is slide 18. And it's designed to improve water quality by providing shade and large vegetation structure, as well as wildlife habitat through native species plantings and noxious weed removal. And that concludes the NROD portion of the presentation to the Planning Commission. The reason this project was presented to the Planning Commission was twofold. One, a separate part of the project required a variance on a retaining wall, which was within our geologic hazard overlay zone. And also, the nature of the mitigation was so significant, and the nature of the impact analysis is so significant that for a city project of this scope, it was decided by the Public Works Department that it needed to be reviewed by the Planning Commission for approval. They approved it, and will be following through with the project for quite some time. The expectation is that the landscaping probably won't be completed for another year or year and a half, because once the roundabout is built, then we'll be actually doing all the plantings along 213 on the interchanges, and keeping the weeds down in those areas as well. There's a section of the project that affects the Redland Road intersection as well, so they inventoried some of the stream reaches along back behind Home Depot and between Redland Road as well. So there's going to be some plantings going on in there, and blackberry eradication there. You'll see that.
Between Highway 213 and Home Depot's.
Well, not as you're like driving down the road and Home Depot's on your left, but actually at the turn as you go down onto Redland Road,
Okay.
down on the right-hand side
All right.
there. Yeah, there's some, because the widening there for the right turn movement, not off of 213, but as you're coming up Redland, they're putting in a right turn movement there that requires additional shoulder, and I think it impacted about 16 feet of
Okay.
buffer. So that's where they're doing some of
Okay.
the soil. Yeah.
I think I missed something here on
Yeah.
water quality. It says mitigation by providing shade and large vegetation structure. What water quality? Where's the water?
Oh,
I mean, what water are we talking about?
well, they're going to be creating a wetland over there in the mitigation site, but there are 3 or 4 smaller wetlands that were impacted directly adjacent to 213, where they're going to be doing some plantings next to those, because currently there's no tree cover where those are as well, and down Washington Street as well. Yeah, yeah.
So do you expect that facility to have a lot of water in it year-round, or just part of the year, or?
I wish I had the statistics for the stormwater calculation, but there will be a pretty, I think they anticipate that it'll have wet storage pretty much year-round, at least in a portion of it. But it'll recede and contract throughout
Yeah.
the season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason you wanted us to see this was I asked, or well, let me ask the next question then. This I'm really glad you did this. It really helps me a lot. And that was, it seemed that there's really some opportunities
Yeah, sorry, Gary.
for trails and
Yeah.
interpretation here.
Let me follow up with you on that question.
Okay.
I asked Alita that specific question, what opportunity for interpretive trails and things of that nature do you think might exist in the future? And there's due to the location of the immediate mitigation site, it's not very accessible. There's a way to get into it from the overpass off of Main Street, but that's about 400-foot walk from Main Street up to where the edge of the mitigation site starts.
Okay.
And then you've got ODOT on one side and the railroad on the other.
Right.
And it's primarily the railroad crossing that is what they've got a temporary permit from Burlington Northern to cross there with the trucks while they're, and ODOT, while they're doing their mitigation. So once that's complete, it's going to take some study to figure out where good interpretive places could go
Okay.
and how to get to them.
Right.
It's challenging, but I don't think it's really been looked at in much detail yet. Yeah.
Well, the reason I bring it up is the mayor
Yeah.
and myself, and I think Richard and Brian, or at least a portion of this group before we were formally formulated, mayor was trying to figure out a way to get connections into Clackamas Cove, and there's this box culvert that connects between one side of I-205 and the other side, beautifully. During floods, it would be a problem.
Oh, yeah.
And now the trail, so-called access road that goes into the wetland where all the work has been done, the excavation area, goes right through there. It's a basic seems like alignment for a trail system. And you talk about 400 feet, that's correct. But there's 2,100 feet on the east side of the cove that people seem to love to walk every day of the year.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
2,000, over 2,000 feet along the east side of the cove that people seem to enjoy. So it just, maybe it isn't now, but in the future, especially with the cove, if it does come into being, natural connectivity thing could be through that box culvert,
Yeah.
which, by the way, was put in there for flood in and out movement of water to equalize pressures and let people who had cows in what was not Clackamas Cove, but a pasture, move back and forth too. That's why it was put there.
Oh, okay. Well,
You know.
it's worth
So it's a marvelous area, and then Metro South Wetland, which is on the south end of Metro. You maybe not know that's there, folks, but there's a 4-acre wetland complex, pond complex there that is very underutilized. Seems like the whole thing could work together. But
Yeah, I agree.
so she didn't say no. She just said,
Yeah,
There's challenges.
It seems challenging at this time
Right.
because of what they know as far as just getting
Sure.
access to it. Yeah. But their priority has been just getting to the site to do the plantings.
Right.
So, yeah. I think more passive recreational uses is sort of a different priority and that kind of thing. So I know it's something that would definitely be interesting. So.
Well, thank you for sharing this with us.
Sure,
I've never
the
seen the
oth-
details. It's excellent.
Yeah, the other document is a 27-page set of plans that were prepared by Michael Feo of Greenworks,
Yep.
and ODOT has signed off on these. They're very detailed. They show the planting plans on the Stein Oil property. I think, let's see if I can tell. There's only three of these plan sets that actually show the mitigation site, because the majority of them are dealing with the interchange and the visible portions of the jug handle project, which will be, but slides 24, 25, 26, and 27 are all the mitigation site plantings. You can see on slide 26 the location of the Union Pacific Railroad, and then how it sits in relation to the right-of-way.
Right.
I don't know if it shows those tunnels, Jerry, but
Those box culverts,
yeah,
they're directly behind the railroad station, just west of the railroad station.
maybe slide 20. Yeah.
But before that road gets removed, it's a fundamental question, which goes right down into your mitigation wetland and so forth, and goes directly by the box culverts. It'd be interesting to look at some connection there trail-wise, but
Yeah. Well, the road is, I think the road will remain
okay,
for mitigation,
Okay.
maintenance.
maintenance, yeah.
Yeah. But we may
It's
have
a
to-
beautiful area, it really
Yeah,
is. Very
it
pretty.
is. And, they did have to do a fair bit amount of tree removal on the mitigation access road, and they did remove trees to make way for the Jug Handle project itself, including the fir trees that were in front of the Metro transfer station and next to near the Oregon City end of the Oregon Trail.
Sequoias,
Yeah.
sequoia.
And those were all part of the calculations and the tree mitigation and that kind of thing. And they were reviewed separately, yeah.
Has anybody given any thought of maybe more potential conflicts with like traffic and wildlife? I know there's a lot of deer like over on Redland Road and also Holcomb, and I'm just wondering with enhanced habitat, you attract more deer, and deer around 213 is a really bad combination.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if it's thought through that.
There's probably part of the EIS that discussed that was reviewed, because this was a federally funded project. And I don't know if there's been any, underpass or overpass design here that's specifically wildlife corridor friendly, but I'm even
thinking about something as minimal as deer
yeah.
sign, something just to warn people if there's more potential for conflicts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that may.
'Cause I've seen
may come up with-
coyotes next to Home Depot, and that's nothing new and really won't change. But if you start attracting large mammals in a high traffic areas, that's
Yeah.
can be pretty serious.
I just don't know if this is going to be accessible to a large mammal, but I'd be happy to check.
No,
see
for me, it's more the idea if you improve habitat and you attract more large wildlife, and they're interesting, exiting
Sure.
and crossing major roads, you can run into some problems.
Yeah, yeah. Well, good question.
You have a bad end for Bambi.
Yeah. I'm not sure what this condition of the existing fences are between the railroad and this mitigation site, and then I don't know if they're planning to fence it out completely when it's established or not, but I'm sure that's part of their plans. This shows a chain link fence in the majority of it, but I don't know how high it is. Normally, this type of project doesn't have a fence that's taller than 6 feet. In most cases, it's a 3-foot fence.
Which isn't
Yeah.
anything for a deer.
I mean, it's nothing for a deer, but I'd be happy to check it out. Yeah. Like, yeah, okay.
None of us, except myself, have hard copy versions of all this? Is that true?
I didn't print out.
Okay, I'm amazed here. I've never seen this before in my life. Maybe Eric has, of dead man anchoring of trees by the root ball, deeper than the tree ball, without any anchoring posts. They've got this design. I'll show it to you guys. I've never seen this done. It's amazing. Where the tree is being stabilized, its root mass, by dead man anchors deeper than the tree, without
That's
any
what I was looking
any other
at.
cabling or anything else.
Which slide is that?
Well, it's probably to let the tree grow naturally. That's a very interesting idea. It's a little more labor, I would
Wide
think.
labor.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's an interesting concept. You ever seen that, Eric?
Slide 7, I believe.
No, I've never seen them before.
I don't think volunteers are going to be doing that.
Interesting concept.
Wow, yeah, no kidding. Oh, I see what you're saying.
That was a water tower.
Wow. Anchor depth, 3 foot.
Yeah, I've never seen
Isn't that
them.
amazing?
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
That looks good.
Okay, well, thank you for doing this. I just,
Sure.
for the record, I would like, to say as one member, I think there's some opportunities here that we should keep track of and work with Alita, whomever, to see if they exist in the future.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, Alita Froman Goodrich is the project engineer in Public Works who's managing all of this day to day and with the ODOT. So she's our go-to person. We have questions about it, and she is top notch, I got to say. All right. So,
Okay.
thanks. And finally, we have item. Well, we're not done yet, I guess. But 4C is our review of our 2012-2013 adopted work plan. Which, if you open that up, it's a 2-page document. And let's see how we're doing. In no particular order, and I should mention again that the NRC may amend its work plan at any time with a consensus of the group. Some of the work plan items are also city commission milestones and are ongoing projects as such. And that's such as the first one, which is addressing the Cove Peninsula stabilization, erosion, and reforestation of public lands, which we're kind of addressing in a multifaceted way, because it's a multifaceted goal. As you know, Nancy Croshauer is no longer our Public Works Director, so we're in a period of transition as we search for a new Public Works Director. John Lewis is the interim Public Works Director, and it looks as if we will hire both a Public Works Director and a separate city engineer, so that the city engineer would be responsible for the day-to-day engineering and overseeing and that kind of thing, and the Public Works Director is working in a more managerial role. Yeah. And
So that's
yeah.
how you're breaking up the former work that Nancy did?
Yeah.
see.
Well, and it's there's definitely some shuffling going on in the Public Works Department as well, because they had other engineers in their staff that are probably going to be assuming new roles and responsibilities, including overseeing the Cove. But John
Overseeing the what?
overseeing the Cove.
Cove. Okay.
Yeah, and any peninsula stabilization that needs to be done on that project. So I'll need to report back to you on that in September. Because the search for a new public works director is going to take a while. Could be, before the end of the year, hopefully. But
Are you doing a search for a new engineer too, or looking, or do you know?
Well, that I don't know,
Okay.
Jerry. Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Pete, I have a question on that search. Are there opportunities for like members of city boards or committees to participate in the review or interview process just to try to get a handle on where different candidates might be coming from?
Well, I think when they hired our city manager, they certainly had a very extensive interview process, and I don't know, but that would be a good question for the mayor. I don't really know what the search committee is going to consist of. Yeah.
Given Public Works' role in that, there might be somebody on this committee that might appreciate an opportunity to sound, maybe final candidates out in certain related topics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not really within my area. Yeah. Second was reestablishment of the tree subcommittee and scope of activities. So this is...
Excuse me, I have one question on,
Sure.
on the first one on the cove stabilization.
How we doing?
Yeah, I guess, how are we doing on that?
What are we doing?
Yeah, what are we doing? Was there actually something underway before Nancy left, or?
No,
Yeah, okay.
no, there wasn't.
I think her hands are thrown up about as much as anybody's would be over this thing. What do you do with a complex thing like that?
What are we supposed to do?
Well, was there really any discussion on it, though, from an engineering perspective? I guess I don't recall any.
No, there wasn't. It was deemed to be the amount of analysis was substantial
Yeah.
that was done previously, and reopening those documents would require significant commitment of staff time, particularly Nancy's time. And I don't think that would change with John. He's going to have to review some of those old documents and see everything that was done. So
What do they want of us?
Well, I'm not really sure.
This is in the city's work plan as a goal,
Yeah.
stabilizing or determining the status of the north spit.
I mean, it seems to me that this goal addresses Cove Peninsula stabilization in one part, then erosion, and then reforestation of public lands. Now, the reforestation of public lands goal is something that is addressed through the David Fresher is very, very behind planting big trees on public lands, and we've been working extensively with private property owners to do that. We've done some parkland plantings with Arbor Day and various other things, so that's sort of an ongoing process.
Ah, okay,
Yeah.
so the reforestation is not necessarily tied to the cove and erosion? I'm confused on exactly what
No.
that sentence means.
Yeah,
It
that's
looks like it's all on the same
exactly
side.
how it's right out of the City Commission goals pamphlet.
Okay,
Yeah, so I think we can interpret it how we see fit. In that
but the
regard.
erosion, what would that refer to?
Well, I'm not really sure. I think there's probably been concerns about erosion of the Cove Peninsula,
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
so I think that would reflect back to the Cove Peninsula.
Right.
And and Brian has taken photographs of some of the erosion that's gone on there. I don't think that the city engineer considered it to be substantial enough to worry about at the time. Yeah, but I think with John assuming this new role, we should probably revisit it, see what how he wants to go forward.
Well, I believe in the city's goals for the year is erosion of the North Peninsula. That's something that's in the
Yeah.
city goals, and I think that's what, I think Jim Nacito got that in there before he left
Yeah.
as a concern, and I think others have picked up on it. But since on the last part of the page, ongoing activities, let's see, establish a ad hoc subcommittee, let's see, as needed to fulfill work plan. Historian, since I'm the history buff here, the historical perspective here is that the North Split's been degrading for a long time. Meanwhile, the channels that allowed water to move in and out of the cove come and go. They are almost gone now as of this low water period right now, and it's still got 5 more feet to go down. There will be no water going in and out of the cove, except leaving the cove through infiltration, and that almost happened last year. Now, some would say that the cove is toast. I don't believe that's the case, because there's so much infiltration coming into the cove bottom that it still pours out. But the bigger picture here is everything is changing down there. You can't believe how it's changing. And the 99E bridge abutments on the north end of the bridge, which is the Gladstone end, the class 1,000, which is 1,000-pound boulders, are now collapsing in the river because they're so badly undermined. There's 200 feet of old conduit that used to carry telephone lines across the river, now exposed in the last 2 years. So I think this committee has an obligation to encourage that people look at the issue on a broad scale. I don't know what to do about it. But the cove is sealing off very nicely.
Is that something where the committee could draft a letter to the commission? And
I'd be happy to work on that with the committee's help, or
And then just
I've done it in the past for the developer to try to help him get
And
the
say,
help he needed.
This is something that you all have looked at and
Yeah.
agree on,
Right.
and then put that before the city commission.
Probably a wise idea.
Yeah,
I think it would be
yeah.
useful, and I've asked for this in the past, to have some type of presentation, because this is unfamiliar to me. I don't
Yeah.
know the ins and
Right.
outs of this.
I attempted to, and I didn't get
And
it.
I think some kind of historical, you need kind of like context, a little bit of history, just make sure we're all at the same
Yeah,
level,
agreed.
to be able to provide input.
Richard has access to some very excellent photographs, which I had access to also. I have at least 12 years of knowledge about this, of how it's changed radically, but there's 20 years of history there that have affected it. I think you're absolutely right, and I'd be happy to host people on a tour, or we could do it off the North Spit. I mean, you can see it better from my River Resource Museum location than you can anyplace else, but whatever. It's kind of like the thing we need to get out in the field and look at it. But
I'll mention it to John Lewis.
yeah.
And see if we can get it back on the agenda.
Sure. And I'd be glad to put together a draft letter for us to look at next month, if you want. Get it to you, and you can send it out to them
Yeah,
about what the content of the concern might be.
yeah, yeah.
I'm not saying the sky is falling. It already fell,
Yeah.
okay? The reality is everything's in place now for a lot of things to become more obvious. And I'm
It
not
starts to
sure they're all
affect-
bad. I'm not sure they're all bad either. So,
Potentially, yeah, it sounds to me like it potentially can affect 99E, of course, and then,
yeah.
yeah, so. But I'll talk to John Lewis, and we'll get that back on the
Good.
agenda.
Maybe you could make a comment on the status of the Cove project,
That'd be nice.
yeah.
Oh.
Is that possible, or?
I don't know. I'm just a lowly planner. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, it hasn't crossed my desk. Tony Conkle is the person that knows the most about that, and he hasn't mentioned anything about it. I think that they are attempting to, I think that the Cove developers, Randy and gosh, I haven't seen it.
Darrell.
Ed, yeah, are attempting to amend the development agreement, but
Were there some financial concerns somewhere?
there are always financial concerns, you know. So I couldn't. you know, we have an approved master plan for the Cove area, which has a fairly long-term approval on it, and then the subsequent phases within the master plan get developed as what they call detailed development plans. What I know is that they got the roadway that serves the development has been platted. The right-of-way has been platted, so the future right-of-way for the Main Street connection through the site's platted. They also have an approved site plan for 200 units of apartments. And that was approved about 1.5 years ago. So those get a 2-year approval typically that they need to construct within. And to date, no construction has happened. So, you know, they need to turn in construction plans to engineering in order to keep that approval valid, you know, and actually start doing building permits. With respect to the remaining phases of the site, which include the mixed-use portions, including restaurant, office, and shops, there's been no site planning done for those yet, but they're anticipated within the larger concept plan. And then with respect to the abutting property, Tri-Cities, they also have a master plan for the Tri-Cities expansion that was approved, and that's a 20-year master plan that goes out to 2023. And what happens on the Cove site affects what happens on the Tri-Cities site and vice versa with respect to utilities and sewer, and if you amend the boundary of one, you have to kind of look at the other. And those two property owners, Tri-Cities and the Cove developers, have been working together to make sure that the apartments are well buffered from Tri-Cities and the Cove site's well buffered through proper screening and things. And there's also parking concerns for the future mixed use. There may be parking needs that are currently unmet on the Cove site that could be accommodated on the Tri-City site. So that hasn't gone anywhere, but if there's additional parking needs that Tri-City says, well, you know, we might do a land swap with you so you can have additional parking on our site, but you got to amend our master plan boundary to do it. So that hasn't occurred yet.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I know as of 1 year ago. And so, you know, and since then, I'm aware of any updates, but I'll be happy to report back. And the other part that you guys are actually, or Jerry's more familiar with than I are the amendments to the revegetation of the Cove itself to preserve some of the existing trees along there.
Richard and I and
Yeah.
others work with the
Sorry.
developers.
Yeah. So that's another aspect of it. Yeah.
Right. But there's no plan to fill in the Cove yet.
Not that I'm aware of.
I'm just
No formal plan.
I'm just kidding.
Okay.
Good.
So, tree subcommittee, deadline for the Tree City USA program, well, let's see, start at the beginning. I need to get Eric a draft of our updated tree list, which I keep meaning to do. We've been very flexible with the public with respect to using abutting municipalities' street tree lists, which are slightly more up to date than ours are. For example, the City of Portland and the City of Gresham. But we'd really like to get our own, you know, because it would be Oregon cities. So we're working on that. And let's see, I talked to Brian Boyce, and I think to Richard too, and to you, Eric, about this nuisance and native plant list that the city currently has. And I think there's I don't know who is driving the effort to provide any kind of county-wide list, and where that's coming from.
I think there was discussion of it, but after talking with some people, there's really nothing going on.
Okay.
So I think we should probably move on from that
I see.
option.
I know the city of Portland and Metro has published a pretty good, very good and extensive plant list that talks about, it doesn't just differentiate between nuisance and native plant species. It gives, gradations of plants according to, how prevalent they are and how invasive they are in the environment, whether they're native or not, or naturalized or not. And that's been a useful resource for me during development review. So I think if we are going to choose to update our own list, that would be a good resource. But the consensus seems to be by the city that if there is an effort afoot to do a regional update for Clackamas County, then we should just be part of that larger effort. And then until then, we'll use whatever adopted lists are available, including our own. On Tree City USA program, the deadline for that's going to be December. So we have observed Arbor Day, and we continue to do tree plantings. We have shown that we met the $2 per capita expenditure last year, but we'll need to update those numbers for this year. And we've got a public tree ordinance, but we've also got a private development tree protection ordinance as well. So I think we've pretty much met most of the criteria. The Oregon Department of Forestry community forestry staff, which consists of 3 people, Paul Rees, Kristen Ramstad, Katie Lompa, very good staff, and they've offered to look over our draft application before the December deadline. So that's kind of where that's at.
On the per capita expenditure, are those hard dollars, or is that?
No, it can be volunteer labor. It can include all sorts of things. Yeah. So it's actually a fairly low bar to meet. I think we're double that than the last time we did the analysis, partly because of the $50,000 that was placed into the big tree planting program, but even without that, we were already exceeding the minimum. Ongoing review of heritage tree and grove nominations on public and private land. Next one is to make recommendations for a program to assist with tree planting in public areas and with consenting private landowners. So the first part of this, I think, has been partially assisted by the placement from the general fund of $50,000 into the tree planting program by the city manager's office. And that money is actually in the Parks Department's budget. And it's being used for the plantings that occurred on Arbor Day and other plantings throughout the city for large trees in public areas. And we're also trying to work with ODOT as well to try to make some plantings, do some plantings on ODOT land, because those represent a lot of the gateway areas to the city. Bullet points here talk about looking into incentives, grants, matching funds, and donations. Possibilities include getting Friends of Trees to expand their program into Oregon City. That's something that we need to follow up on and haven't really explored yet with their chief management officer. But it's an excellent program in Portland and other cities up in the metro area, because they train the neighborhoods to have coordinators that live within those neighborhoods and can train the neighbors how to plant trees properly.
Pete, I don't know if this is appropriate here as a add-on at the end, but the one thing that's come up over and over again is the finite capacity to utilize volunteers, because there's not dedicated city staff to kind of recruit, manage, and coordinate volunteers. And this is it's almost, if you look at this being the work plan of the Natural Resources Committee, and it says coordinate volunteer activities, there's kind of a disconnect between like we individually coordinating with Friends of Trees. It's kind of like, it seems that as far as the committee's role goes in coordinating volunteer activities, we could be more effective trying to get the city to allocate resources to have dedicated staff that would do that on a continuous basis than what we're going to be doing individually as committee members to coordinate the volunteer activities. And we could address, if that's a separate thing, then that's fine. But I'm just trying to, as a former volunteer manager and coordinator, trying to be realistic about this committee's role regarding volunteer involvement.
Yeah, I agree. We used to have the Metro Grant Coordinator used to serve in somewhat of a capacity of hooking up city projects with, deserving groups and that kind of thing, in order to administer the Metro Grant program. And that is currently administered through Kathy Griffin in Public Works now, I believe. But in terms of having a full-time or even a half-time volunteer coordinator, no, we don't. So if that's a recommendation that you want to continue.
Yes, I am.
As equally important as spending $50,000 on reforestation is putting an effort forward to acquire somebody to help encourage volunteerism. I think you were talking about Mary Palmer. Isn't that who you were talking about?
From the
oversaw the Metro Grant process, also brought together community resources to make things happen.
Yeah.
And that Michelle Benville has a part-time contract with the city to look at the grants, make sure they're being applied for correctly and complied with correctly, but she doesn't do any of the other. But remember the lady we had come speak to us 2 months ago? Brian had come in, Lori Griffith from Westland, talked about her role as a volunteer coordinator. It's pretty interesting that.
And I think in adding to that, not only could a volunteer coordinator help facilitate residents' participation in these projects, they could also help facilitate the city's access to things like academic internships that could take on special project or supplement staff activity.
Yeah. One thing I had mentioned to Eric before the meeting started was the Portland State University has students that are looking for projects.
Capstone program.
Yeah, capstone projects and also internships, non-paid. So it's more a question of hooking up with the right faculty member and suggesting the project with enough lead time.
Absolutely.
So that's another option that is attractive to me as a planner, because I think you're getting kids who are familiar with city processes. Yeah, graduate students. Yeah.
But I guess what I'm trying to say is, if this is a serious part of our work plan, we need to incorporate the timing into the city's budget development timeline, because if it doesn't get into the budget development process and get approved, there's not going to be funds available to pay a staff person to carry out the activities. So there's kind of a timeline that
And
this
I
has
think
to
we
fit
should,
into.
like suggesting a letter, a recommendation to the city commission regarding the concerns about the river and the cove interface. I think equally a letter from us to the city commission about what we think might be workable would get it in the process you're talking about.
I would be willing to draft a generic letter on the volunteer, just something for people to review or think about or add to, that would hopefully begin to make a case, for the city allocating those resources to fund that position.
Okay.
Good.
Great.
I'd
Thanks,
do that.
Bob.
Sure.
Golly, I thought you were going to volunteer to do that.
Been there, done that.
Well, no, I think this
You
is
can talk to
important.
my
point.
mortgage holder. I got it made.
And if Jerry, offered to
That's a
take the
great
lead on
idea.
the on the Cove letter, that'd be great.
Okay, I will do that.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Well, I think that's a good synopsis of where we're at today, unless you guys have any other comments right now.
You want on the whole work plan?
Yeah.
Do you know, there is one thing on the next page, you're talking about the climate change.
Sorry, yeah.
The second one on the next page. Doesn't the county have a sustainability coordinator?
Yes.
Could
they
we
do.
get that individual to do a presentation to this group? Because if we or the state were going to do things, it would be really good to have a really good handle on where the county's up to, what they're involved with, and that way, whatever we suggest or recommend or try and enact would complement that.
Yeah, Susan Zolko and Ethan Polk are the staff at the county and that are in